Hey there, welcome back to another episode of CUPE Cast. Are you hoping to learn more about unions or progressive movements? Then you're in the right spot. I'm Brittany Nisbet and I use she and her pronouns.
I'm Brianna Plummer. I use she, her pronouns, reminding you that we're the only podcast of our kind, combining union info, pop culture, and more. Kicking ass for the working class, one podcast at a time. Whether you're a member of CUPE, in a union, wish you were in a union, or just found us while browsing, you're definitely in the right place. To hear more episodes, look for the CUPE Cast anywhere you stream or download podcasts, and for feedback or future episode ideas, don't forget you can email us at cupecast@cupe.on.ca. That is CUPECAST@cupe.on.ca.
So, March 8th is a super exciting day for women and folks who identify as women because it is International Women's Day, which is a day to celebrate all that women have and continue to accomplish. So, for this episode of CUPE Cast, we're going to focus on the women of CUPE, the contributions certain women have made to the labor movement, and we have a message from CUPE National Secretary-Treasurer Candace Rennick. So, get ready for another exciting episode.
That's right, you're listening to CUPE Cast, episode 34, Inspiring Inclusion, Inspire Change. So the new year usually kicks off the award season, and many of us get excited to see which artist, which actor, which actress, and which movie take home the top awards. Of course, each award ceremony sometimes have its moments.
It's
Like
moments.
for example, the 2024 Golden Globe Awards, which took place in January.
January, yeah.
Brittany, yeah, did you hear what happened at this this
Uh,
Golden Globes?
It had a moment, that's for sure. It was
Yes.
a moment.
Um, so by the time you hear this episode, this is probably old news, but we want to bring it back up again. We think it's worth talking about. If our listeners did not have a chance to watch the Golden Globes, totally forgot about it, let's bring everyone up to speed. So you might remember our episode back in August of 2023 called Strong Woman Summer. We chatted about how the Barbie movie, Taylor Swift, and Beyonce basically ruled the summer and how amazing it was. Definitely a hot girl summer, hot woman summer, sorry about that. Women literally kept the economy going. And like we said in that episode, we are not the ones to applaud capitalism, but it is a big deal that these three women kept the economy moving forward.
Oh, totally, totally. And so at the Golden Globes back in January, the host was a comedian named Joe Coy, and he made some really inappropriate jokes about Barbie, about women, and about Taylor Swift. And it really showed us that unfortunately, misogyny is clearly alive and well. And I actually found out from a friend when we were talking about it that a bunch of people actually turned down hosting the Golden Globes
Yeah.
and that Joe Coy was only found 10 days before.
Yeah, I heard about that too. That's very terrible, just to say. The jokes were truly awful, and when he said it, the comments he made, just to kind of give reason why he made those statements, which we won't repeat because they are so disgusting, but you could truly see the footage of like Taylor Swift, Margot Robbie, Great Gerwig, and Selena Gomez clearly not laughing and
No, yeah.
putting their, they have their lips kind of turned, and they're putting their drinks down, their heads on like their heads in their hands. So when I saw these clips on social media, the musical snippet that like people use for popular IG stories, I'm gonna like sing it, but I will apologize in advance because I don't have the greatest like singing voice. But like the people use like the snippet that goes like, oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Like the one like when you're making like an error or something's going wrong.
Yeah,
That is literally what's running through my head. He's making that joke, and then it like the camera pans to the audience, and that is playing in the background.
Yep. Oh, totally. That oh yeah. Yeah. And the unfortunate thing is like I would assume anyway that like a lot of his jokes and like would have had to go past a group of people before. So
Yeah.
like being someone who's been on stage before, and I mean, I understand that he's a comedian, so it's a little different, but like there's teleprompters in front of you with your script reminding you of the words to say. So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm going at minimum there probably would have been some prompts or something for him. Like there's no way you and your I mean, I could be wrong cuz like people are also very talented and I know where my talents end, but like I would
Yeah.
assume that like he would have had a script or prompts or something and like this stuff would have had to go through a group of people before. Like someone would have had to read or approve them beforehand.
Yeah, so there's an article that went over some parts of the interview on Good Morning America where Joe says, "We had 10 days to try and write something for this monologue." Sorry, I'm mocking him. And it was a crash course. So that does tell us that it
Oh.
wasn't just him making the comments. There was a group of people, like you said, Brittany, behind the scenes. But I think for me, the thing is that it's the worst if the audience had laughed. It wasn't even funny. The way the women in the audience reacted, we
Yeah.
could see that his so-called jokes made everyone feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So if you want to see the footage again, there is a post that was done by at Mavix. I'll just spell it. So it's Mattivx. Posted a thread about it on Instagram on January 8th if you want to look at it. It also includes America Fiera's speech from the Barbie movie and about how it's literally impossible to be a woman. So it kind of reinforces that speech from the Barbie movie. We'll add
Mhm.
a link to the thread in our show notes.
Yeah, and like this all just goes to show the work that we need to do, not only of course in the entertainment business, but in like all areas. So it just shows us there's still more work, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I do want to highlight some good news about women taking leadership roles. So this
Yes.
news is coming out of the United States. If we have any American listeners, have you heard about this story? So the residents of St. Paul, Minnesota elected their first all-female city council at a recent election. This is
Yay!
groundbreaking.
It
Yes,
is.
yay. I know, yay. I've never heard about this. Never
No,
seen this before.
no.
This is groundbreaking, and it's reported to be the first in the city's history, but also first in major cities across the United States.
Yeah, and so I read an article about this, when because I had heard about it, and so I read the article, and I was super proud to learn that that this milestone has been achieved at St. Paul. And according to USA Today, the new city council comprises mostly of women of color and all under the age of 40. So in the article,
Yeah.
Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is quoted saying, "This should be the way it is. And young people are going to dream big and achieve their dreams because of the risk they are willing to take."
I love that quote. Very
I
powerful. And, you know, these women are around, myself and Brittany's age group. So
Mm.
this is very inspiring to see.
Some elder
And as we
millennials.
know, elder millennials, younger millennials as
Yeah.
well, some of them could potentially be like an older Gen Z,
Oh, yeah.
but it is great. It's a great milestone. And we know this kind of achievement does not happen overnight.
No.
Similar to the labor movement, sometimes it takes months, even years of mobilizing and organizing for something like this to happen.
Mm.
The council representative for St. Paul Ward 6, her name is Nesli Yang, stated that this was a vision she had when she started organizing over 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yang stated that change doesn't happen with the same voices at the table.
No, it absolutely does not.
Yeah.
But we all know that sometimes with change, there also comes pushback. There are some people who, of course, are not happy with the fact that there's a city council that is all comprised of women, which I'm so surprised that they're not happy. I'm going to go and like say it's probably people that lost. And there is a
Yeah.
clip from the January 9th inauguration ceremony that has the city council president, Mira Jalal, responding to the pushback. So here's the clip.
If you read my Twitter replies lately, the responses sure are something. They're fighting for their lives in there. Let's just say A whole lot of people who were comfortable with majority male, majority white institutions for nearly 170 years of city history are suddenly sharply concerned about representation. My thoughts and prayers are with them in this challenging time.
Ladies and gentlemen, your 2024 St. Paul City Council.
I really applaud how Mitra Jalal responded. I also took the liberty of reading some of the comments. Sometimes you just have to read the comments to see how people respond to videos.
Why would you? Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't.
I know sometimes you don't, but in this case, I think I thought I would enjoy it. And not to my surprise, some of the comments actually linked back to the Golden Globes. And a lot of the users were saying was, "This is how you make a joke, Joy Coy."
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So the timing is great, and it was clearly well received from the audience, so that's good. And we want to give
Yeah.
recognition to the achievements that these women have made in St. Paul, and we really wish them luck during their term. So while this may seem like a great milestone, I want to touch on the underrepresentation of women in municipal politics. So according to data from the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University, only 32% of women are in municipal official roles in the United States, and these numbers are really similar in Canada too.
Yeah, that's correct, Brittany. So, according to research made by the Canadian Municipal Barometer at the University of Calgary, in 2023, women represented about 31% of all municipal elected representatives in Canada. 22% of mayoral positions in Canada are held by women.
And both the Center for American Women in Politics and the Canadian Municipal Barometer at the University of Calgary, they do a wonderful job at breaking down the data by state and by province. So if you're interested in learning more or reading the stats, you can check out the link to the reports in our show notes.
Totally. We touch on the underrepresentation of women in leadership position and politics, and we know this is true across all different sectors. That is why International Women's Day is so important.
Absolutely. And so this year's theme is Inspire Inclusion. And the International Women's Day website says, when women aren't present, we must ask, if not, why not? When women are discriminated against, we must call out poor practice. When the treatment of women is not equitable, we must take action, and we must do this every time.
The website goes on to say we can inspire inclusion by forging women's economic empowerment, recruiting, retaining, and developing female talent, supporting women and girls into leadership, decision-making, business, and STEM, designing and building infrastructure meeting the needs of women and girls, helping women and girls make informed decisions about their health, involving women and girls in sustainable agriculture and food security, providing women and girls with access to quality education and training, elevating women and girls' participation and achievement in sport, promoting creative and artistic talent of women and girls, and finally, addressing further areas supporting the advancement of women and girls.
And this is why I'm so happy to see that CUPE Ontario does things like AROP, and we have the WILD
Yeah.
program where,
Yeah.
we're really working towards inclusion at the forefront, but we're also really working towards empowering women. And I know that WILD isn't happening this year, but I really can't wait to see it start again and how more women grow within CUPE and the labor movement as a whole.
I agree.
I was just 16 when I became a member of CUPE. I got involved soon after that while I was working at a long-term care facility in Peterborough, the community where I grew up. I saw pretty quickly in the workplace things that I didn't like, things that were grossly unfair, and I wanted to work with my colleagues to help make them right. You know, the nursing home where I worked was not different than any other nursing home. Most employees were women. We were badly paid. We had few benefits. Most of us had no pensions. I don't think that I identified way back then as a feminist, but I knew instinctively that the work that we were doing was undervalued because it was considered women's work. I mean, we cared for residents, we prepared food, we did the laundry. Everything we did was absolutely essential, but we were treated like we were worth absolutely nothing. Now, my understanding of why things were the way they were in my workplace and in long-term care generally deepened as my union involvement grew. I went to CUPE workshops and conferences, and I found out that in the nursing home sector, it was disproportionately Black and racialized, that many of us were working with no guaranteed hours, that our ability to improve our working conditions was hampered by labor laws that denied our right to strike and forced us into an arbitration system that, quite frankly, was rigged against us. Now, admittedly, the situation, it made me incredibly angry. I couldn't stand the injustice. It made no sense to me that we could be earning so little given how hard we worked. And yet, despite all of that, there was no escape. I mean, low wages meant that most of us were poor. And when you're poor and completely dependent on your paycheck to buy groceries and to pay rent, you can't risk losing that. And I often wondered why my union wasn't doing more to help us fight back. It felt like those of us working in long-term care were not getting the attention that we needed, and certainly the attention that we deserved. So I became a bit of an agitator within CUPE. Some might say that I was a thorn in the side of those who were making decisions about how collective bargaining was handled, or how much support we were getting for our sector, how much money was being spent to tackle big problems in long-term care like government underfunding, understaffing, and overwork. And at the time, this is going back 2 decades ago, more than that, Judy Darcy was CUPE's national president, and she first got involved in CUPE as a young library worker at the University of Toronto. And like me, she was outraged by how badly women workers in female-dominated workplaces like her own were being treated. Like me, she got frustrated with our union for not doing enough, but I didn't let her history as a left-wing union leader, as a feminist, as a militant, stop me from picking up the phone, giving her a call, and demanding more and better from our union. You know, those early days as a CUPE local leader really did shape and shift my thinking for life. I still like to meet with other CUPE workers and figure out what we have in common, what we can do to address and tackle the problems that we have collectively. And I'm always seeking, things to learn, finding new people that I can learn from. And I don't think that anyone can learn too much. And it's especially important, I think, for leaders to remember that alone they don't have all of the answers. I mean, still to this day, I'm angered by injustice, by exploitation, and by economic, social justice and political systems that, quite frankly, perpetuate and entrench inequity. I get frustrated when I don't see employers, governments, and even our own union doing enough. And I continue to be inspired by, workers who find ways to build power and then use it to make real and meaningful and lasting gains. Even now, but perhaps especially now that I hold one of CUPE's top leadership positions, I constantly remind myself to be courageous, to not be afraid to push hard for change, and to be respectful of all of those who push me for change. I think that's really important. The people that I admire the most, the people that I've worked closely with, those who've served as mentors and guides to me, they don't just support me the most, but they also demand the most. So if I have any advice to give to others on International Women's Day, I think it would be to try hard not to be defensive in those difficult moments, to be open and inclusive, to listen and learn, be brave, fight injustice, to demand system change, to find allies, and always act together with others by your side.
Thank you, Candace, for sharing your thoughts and perspective with us. I'm sure our listeners love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Don't you think so, Brittany?
Oh, totally, totally. It's always nice to hear from Candace. And as some of our listeners may be aware, CUPE Ontario also has a women's committee, and these members are elected at the Women's Conference. So the chair of the committee is elected at the CUPE Ontario Convention to serve a 2-year term.
That is correct. So we reached out to Marilena Fox, who is the chair of CUPE Ontario's Women's Committee, to ask her to share her thoughts and let our listeners know what the Women's Committee is up to this year. Marilena is a member of CUPE 4000, where she currently is the recording secretary and communications officer. Marilena sent us a clip with her thoughts. We hope that you enjoy what she had to say.
Hello and thanks to CUPE Cast for the invite. My name is Marilena Fox, and I'm the chair for CUPE Ontario Women's Committee. The labor movement for women is an ongoing struggle. 32 years ago, listening to men telling 25 women who were secretaries and clericals working in a hospital environment that once we were amalgamated, we would be lucky enough to get a job scrubbing the floors. The comment rubbed me the wrong way, so much so that we chose to fight back. Now, alone we can do little, together we can do so much. And we were able to fight back, and we were also able to get a representation seat within our new local. In today's day and age, we're still fighting for a world and a workplace free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. We need a world that is inclusive, diverse, and equitable. We need to shine a spotlight on uplifting and inspiring women to pursue goals without barriers or bias. We need to truly include women who openly embrace their age, ability, diversity of race, faith, body image. CUPE Ontario Women's Committee is currently working on trying to develop a province-wide women's advocate program so that we can strengthen mechanisms for those needing support around gender bias, sexual harassment, and violence. We need to keep the mentoring movement alive and continue to fight to create safer spaces within our workplace and union and to support women in leadership roles. We need to keep inspiring, including, embracing, and we need to promote each other. To any woman who is entering the labor movement, remember, as Missy Copeland said, be strong, be fearless, be beautiful, and believe that anything is possible when you have the right people there to support you. CUPE Ontario Women's Committee, we stand united in supporting all women.
Thank you so much, Marilena, for sharing your thoughts with us. And if folks are interested in learning more about the Women's Committee, we really encourage you to check out their page on the CUPE Ontario website. They also have a Facebook page where they provide content and updates to their followers, so you can check both of those out in our show notes as well.
This year and for the past 40 years, Toronto has held an International Women's Day parade. It's usually organized by the International Women's Day Organizing Committee, women working with immigrant women, and lots of other social justice and labor groups like CUPE, for example.
I have always wanted to go to the parade, but I really just haven't had the chance. And last year there was like a massive snowstorm and they still did it, just so folks know. Like,
Yeah.
weather does not stop. The weather does
Nope.
not stop the women in Toronto in that parade. But yeah, I've never gone. I've always wanted to go. But Brianna, you said, I think like we were chatting before the episode and you were saying you've been part of it?
Yeah, so I've actually gone several times with my local's women's committee. So I'm part of my local's women's committee, and every year we decide to go as a cohort. It's really a great experience to be with other organizations, grassroots organizations, and other CUPE members or unionized members to advocate for women's rights. It's usually cold. And there's usually a wind tunnel. If you're from Toronto, you would know the streets. So when you're walking up Bloor towards Yonge, because there's so much condos, super tall buildings, it is a total wind tunnel at that point. But it's still great to be surrounded by women and those who identify women and other gender diverse folks who want to advocate for rights. So it's just a great experience. Little side note. So the last one, it's the second last one, was in 2020. And that was just like the week before the shutdown. And I keep thinking about it in hindsight. I'm like, there were thousands of us marching the week before the lockdown. And I'm like, I didn't know no one I knew caught COVID around that time. But it still amazes me that, that was like the last kind of big hurrah for me before everything kind of shut down.
Oh,
Yeah.
my anniversary with Matthew was around that time. So our last hurrah was we went on a date. and that was it. But that's really cool. Like I hope that one day I can make that parade because it just sounds so neat. And you know what? You prepare for the weather accordingly. We all live
Yeah.
in Canada. We know what we got ourselves into. But
Oh
for
yeah.
people like myself who may not be in or around Toronto in time for the parade, there's always lots of events happening around the world. Toronto is not the only place that has a parade. So we encourage you to check out what's happening within your own communities, connect with your CUPE councils, your labor councils. A couple of years ago, I remember the Niagara Center NDP had like a women's breakfast and they had Peggy Nash there as a speaker. So there's always something going on somewhere. And one other thing that I always like to do to commemorate International Women's Day is I take part in the OFL's March 8th project by purchasing one of their International Women's Day pins. And like fun fact for our listeners, I actually have a giant labor pin collection. Like I'm not kidding. I inherited it from a really, really good friend. So it holds a special place in my heart. But
Aw.
since I got it, I've started to add my own touches to it here and there throughout the years. And so the OFL March 8 International Women's Day pin is always a part of the collection. So I always include it.
I would love to see your pin collection one day.
Oh,
just to know. And then like the stories behind it. Just be like, you know,
Yeah.
I got this pin from here.
Yeah.
And there's a story behind this pin. I would love to see
Yeah.
that collection one day.
Oh, it's
Also-
heavy. I'll bring it to like something. People trade pins. So if you're a
Yeah, I
pin
know.
trader, hit me up because I have lots.
The OFL also have posters that you're able to purchase to commemorate International Women's Day. So if you're a poster fan, make sure you pick one up. The OFL March 8th project has been going on for 14 years now, and every year the pins and posters are sold out. And the proceeds of the sales always go to organizations recommended by the OFL executive, by the OFL Women's Committee. So past organizations they've supported included the Ontario Equal Pay Coalition, Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, Hub Club, Youth Camp. OFL sponsored 5 Girls to Attend, Strawberry Ceremony honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women, and Girls Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, Rise Up, Feminist Digital Archive, and various women's shelters and Native women organizations.
That's so many. That's so many. It's
Yeah.
so great that they sell out and that they're able to help all of those organizations. And just so folks know, at the time of recording this episode, the theme for this year has not been unveiled, but I'm sure it will be soon. And I really can't wait to see what they decide for 2024. You can also check out the OFL March 8 Project website for events because I'm certain that they'll post those when they come up as well.
Yeah, they'll update it as they get closer and closer to the day of the event. So before wrapping up this episode, we want to flag some key dates for our listeners. I'm going to start with CUPE Ontario's convention. So I know we're a few months away from CUPE Ontario convention, but the deadline to submit a resolution is fast approaching. If your local district council is interested in submitting a resolution, you still have a few weeks to get them in. There are also some awards that folks can be nominated for, like the Sisters in Solidarity Award, which is, promoted and selected by CUPE Ontario's Women's Committee. We'll add a link to the show notes for more information. Also, shameless plug, you can check out our May 2023 episode if you actually want to learn more about CUPE Ontario's convention.
Yeah, so if your local is sending you and this is your first time, then you can check that out because it's inside baseball, really inside baseball, but lots of good information. And 2 more key dates that we want to share with our listeners. March 21st is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And March 31st is the International Transgender Day of Visibility. So as unionists, we really work hard towards advocating and eliminating discrimination in all of its forms.
Yes, and we want to encourage our listeners to learn more about these commemorative days. And if your local is doing something to observe these days, we'll love to hear more about it. You can tell us in your review. And we'll add any statements from CUPE Ontario, if they make any statements about these days, in our show notes.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into episode 34 of the CUPE Cast, Inspire, Inclusion, Inspire Change. This podcast was written and researched by us, so Brianna and myself, and we want to take a moment to thank all the CUPE Ontario staff involved with this episode, because without them, this podcast would not exist. If you have future podcast ideas, please email us at cupecast@on.ca. That's cupecast. That's CUPECAST at cupe.on.ca. We also want to thank our wonderful friend Mohammed Akbar for being the edit master, because this podcast definitely would not sound as great as it does and without his talents.
Before we close out, we also want to thank you, all our incredible listeners, for tuning into this episode of CUPE Cast. Please continue to look for us anywhere you stream or download podcasts, which includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or on the CUPE Ontario's website. Please follow or subscribe to the CUPE Cast, and if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Anchor, write us a review, leave us a message, and let us know what you thought about the episode. We encourage you to share the link with your friends or fellow members in your local. Our show notes have tons of information that you can share with your loved ones, your friends, and your local. Thank you for listening. Sending solidarity.